Welcome to the Prime Property Finance Podcast with Gareth Morgan and Mark Watts. This unique podcast will dive deep into all areas of property investing finance, going behind the scenes with property professionals, investors and clients. Between us, we have 35 plus years experience in property finance. The podcast has been launched to share knowledge, mindset requirements and experiences of successful investors and professionals. We aim to simplify many of the complicated areas of finance and investing and provide valuable and easy to implement tips. Keep an eye out for our new longer episodes every Tuesday and our shorter ones every Friday. One of the most common questions property investors ask us is, how much should I offer for this property? And it's very easy to approach that question in the wrong direction. If you look at the asking price and then compare that to what's currently on the market, and then you try and convince yourself that the numbers work, then sometimes you can come unstuck. An old mentor and friend of mine many years ago, Dixie Walker, taught me a simpler way to look at it. And it's something that sticks in my mind to this day. And it's always a good way to look at property. And the aim and the goal of this is to be able to do this so you can filter through potential deals quickly. So a quick shout out to Dixie for introducing me to this idea many years ago, and it's called the Hamlet Challenge. So the name comes from back in the day when people would be sort of down the pub talking about ideas and things. They would have cigarettes and they would, there was a saying, back of a fag packet figures. And so the idea from Dixie's perspective was to use a Hamlet packet, which was a cigar packet, which when you pull the sleeve out and unfold it, it was a slightly bigger piece of card to deal with than a back of a fag packet, which means a little bit more room for squiggling on. So that's where the idea comes from. And the idea is really quite simple, is that you should be able to assess the deal on the back of a fag packet. And if you can do that, you can quickly decide whether it's something that you can just bin off because it doesn't work, or whether you can kind of move on with it and go to the next level of due diligence. Now, this isn't to replace due diligence by any stretch of the imagination. This is just giving you an indication of what you can do by starting with the end in mind, working out what the sort of end value is going to be, working backwards, what's the cost going to be, and then hopefully come up with a realistic offer price for you. So let's dive into the main elements of this. So number one is start with the end in mind. Like I said, so the main principle behind the Hamlet Challenge is one that applies to all investing, is start with the end in mind. What is the end value going to be? So if you're going to do a BRR project, a buy, refurbish and refinance, what you're trying to do is create some value. So if you're going to create value, you're going to be differentiating between the purchase price and the end value, or the GDV. Okay, so what we're trying to do is, what's the completed value? So what will the likely refinance amount be? We take away the refurbishment cost, we take away all the fees, and then that's the amount we would like to offer. So that's the kind of premise of it. So step one on this would be to establish the GDV, the gross development value, the end value, the done up value. It's called many different things, but we refer to it as the GDV. So in a straightforward refurbishment deal, what will the estimated market value be on the property once all the works have been completed? So at a high level, if you know your area well, you will know what these properties go for. So the premise, again, like I mentioned, is to be able to assess deals quite quickly. If you know that this property, let's say mid-terrace property, and once it's done up, it's going to be worth 200,000, and you can back this up. Now, this isn't to go into the next level of detail of support in terms of due diligence, but when you would start doing that, you'd look at the recently sold comparables, similar sizes and conditions, similar property types. What's the local market like? Some properties differ from street to street. And then, this is a realistic end value and not an aspirational one. And so if you know your area really well and the property types that you are looking to buy, then you should know these figures pretty well, so that the first line, that if you do it up to a certain standard, you can fill that out as line one, which is the end value. Once you've done that, then we want to apply the expected refinance figure. Now, if it's a straightforward buy-to-let, generally speaking, it's 75% loan to value. So let's say, to keep the figures nice and simple, the end value on this particular deal, and as an example, would be 200,000. if we're going to get a 75% loan, buy-to-let loan, once the once the project's finished, then we would take 75% of the 200,000, which would be 150,000 as a refinance. So as long as there's a few things that we need to understand there from a 75% perspective, will the rental stress test match up? Will the lender criteria, etc.? But again, this is all just really high level, quick deal analysis. So not in-depth due diligence. Once we've understand the GDV and the 75% refinance, then the next step, the next number on the list would be to deduct the refurbishment cost. So if it's a BRR deal, a buy, refurbish, refinance, what is the refurbishment budget? Now, again, this is for you to know the detail in. If you're looking at properties online, Rightmove, Zoopla, etc., you say, well, I know what that would be once I've done it up. The next part is, well, what are the works that are involved? Looking at the photos, this may be before you even visit the site. So you're scrolling through Rightmove or Zoopla late at night because you can't sleep. And then you're going, this looks like a tired property. This needs new kitchen, new bathroom, might need new electrics, etc., new radiators, new flooring, redecorating. So just by looking at that and having a bit of a checklist in your mind, you'll be able to say, well, this refurb on this property to get it to the condition that I need to get a £200,000 valuation would be around £40,000. So what we do then is we go back to the calculation. So we put the 200,000 on the first line, which is the end value. The second line is 75% of the end value, which is 150. Then we deduct the refurbishment budget in this example, which is 40,000. And that leaves us with 110,000. And it doesn't quite end there. There's one more line in here that we need to work out. So once we've done that, we need to put our costs in place. Stamp duty on these types of transactions are quite hefty in the current climate. You've got solicitors' fees, valuation fees, broker fees, lenders' fees, insurance, holding costs, etc. So again, a quick summary of what those may be. So in this example, we're going to use a figure of 10,000 to keep it nice and simple for listeners to follow along. So the final line in this, so the first line, as a reminder, is 200,000 GDV. Then we take away 75%, which is 150,000. Sorry, we apply 75%, which is 150,000 of the 200,000 valuation. Take away the mortgage, the refurbishment costs of 40,000. Take away the costs of 10,000, and that leaves us with an indicative purchase price of 100,000. Now, for us, this is looking at the BRR ideal all money out type scenario. So we're left with a figure of 100,000. Now, that doesn't mean that this deal doesn't work if you get it for 100,000 or it's a walk away figure. It's just a really, really straightforward calculation when you're looking at properties to go, does this deal work at a high level? Now, this property might be on the market for 180,000 and straight away you can decide that this deal isn't going to work. It's too far away. Whereas it might be on the market for 135 and all of a sudden then there's a conversation to be had. You might not be able to get it for 100,000. You might be able to get it for 110. But it means, so it won't be an all money out figure, but it means that the project has some legs. And that's where you start then getting the more due diligence to really ratify the numbers in terms of the GDV. You go and inspect and get a build cost on the refurb, and then just try and see where you can save money and how quickly you can get this done, which might save on some of the finance costs, etc. So it gives you a really high level understanding of, is this deal worth exploring further? If not, move on, or just put it on a list and make an offer and move on. So hopefully that's a really simple, straightforward explanation of how you can assess property deals quite quickly. And like you said, reverse engineer the whole deal. Does it make sense? Start with the end in mind and work backwards. And then you'll quickly start being able to filter through potential properties. They land on your desk. You just quickly look at the numbers. Does it work? Yes or no? If it's got legs, then you start exploring the conversation a bit further and you'll be able to quickly save time by not exploring deals that have just got no legs to start with. So hopefully that's been helpful. Obviously, there's a heap more things that you would need to do before you take it any further, but this is just something that I've used for years now to just, whenever I like the look of something, work it out quickly, work backwards, and decide whether it's anything that I want to spend any time on before looking at any further. So like I said, that's the Hamlet challenge, a quick way of starting with the end in mind and working backwards to an indicative offer price. Take the expected value, calculate the refinance, deduct the refurbishment, and then deduct every other cost associated with the project. What remains gives you an initial indication of the purchase price required for an all money out deal. It will not replace the due diligence, and it certainly does not guarantee the valuation nor the refinance, but it can stop you wasting hours analysing properties that were never going to support your strategy in the first place. Once again, a big shout out to my old mentor and friend, Dixie Walker, for sharing the concept with me many years ago. The next time you're looking at a refurbishment opportunity, do not begin with the asking price. Start with the end in mind, work backwards, and let the numbers tell you what you can and can't afford. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. This episode is intended as general education guide and is not personal financial, mortgage valuation or tax advice. Obviously, lending criteria, valuations, costs, and individual circumstances vary, so always complete full due diligence and take appropriate professional advice before committing to a property transaction. See you soon. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you have learned something and have some tips to take away. We'd be very grateful if you enjoyed the show. You could give us a review and share with anyone that you know that may be interested, and of course subscribe to the show so you can get notified when a new episode is released. If you'd like us to answer any questions or go deeper on a specific topic, please drop us a message at primeproperty.finance. See you on the next episode.